What is functional muscle? Functional muscle. Muscle's obvious. What the heck is functional? Let me break down some simple facts. Building muscle isn't actually all that hard. If your muscle gets an adequate amount of training stimulus and volume, you supply the body with enough calories, and you also get adequate building blocks for muscle tissue, protein, then you can grow muscle. Sure, there's plenty of other factors that impact muscle growth, like sleep, hormone balance, stress and recovery, micronutrients, all of that. But at the end of the day, if you apply those 3 principles that I already mentioned consistently, you're gonna grow. Now, it will get harder over time to add more and more muscle as you become more advanced, but it's still pretty simple. The execution takes a lot of work, but the recipe isn't complex science. It's like simple arithmetic. So what are those 3 recipe ingredients? Your calories in have to be greater than your calories out to build muscle. For protein, an adequate amount is 1 gram per pound of your ideal body weight. How about training intensity? I need you to be at an 8 out of 10 on the effort scale for a minimum of 10 to 20 sets per body part per week. You can do fewer sets if you're a beginner, but you're gonna need more sets if you're more advanced. Okay, we got that out of the way. Now let's talk about the topic of the day, functional muscle. Have you experienced or witnessed someone that has a lot of muscle, but just doesn't seem able to use it in any applicable way in life, other than for show? If you're like me or other functional bodybuilders, and you just don't care to pack on meaningless show muscle, then you might be someone who resonates with the concept of functional muscle. That's right, muscle that can function in a way that just about anyone that sees it would argue, yeah, that person can do a lot of cool stuff and they look good. At functional bodybuilding, we call it the look good, move well approach to training. But should we go ahead and define what functional is? I would have to say there is no more commonly used term in fitness these days that has so many different definitions. Some say function is just what do you do in a given day? Is function simply defined by what you do in your day-to-day life? I mean, I see a lot of people that just get up, drive to work, sit down, get back up, drive home, eat dinner, watch Netflix, and go to bed. There isn't much required for that kind of function. No, that just doesn't seem right. We can't define it simply by what you do in a day, because I would argue that even those individuals desire to have more functionality than just being able to drive to work, sit down, drive home, and eat a dinner. Yep. I believe there's a better definition of function, and it lies somewhere in the shapes that our bodies are designed to make, positions and shapes that our physiology are capable of adopting. For example, our bodies are designed to squat ass to grass. Our bodies are designed to reach overhead pain-free. Our bodies are also designed to reach behind us pain-free. You should be able to hinge forward fully, touch your toes, and even beyond. Our backs, they should flex and extend pain-free under load. And you should sure as heck be able to run, jump, climb, and throw. And in order to do these things, we need healthy joints and tissues. We need strength through the fullest range of our body's capable movement patterns. Sure, there are some people that have very specific functional needs for their jobs, even their sports or hobbies, and we might therefore want to tweak their training to support those positions more heavily. But the general definition as I see it, that no matter who you are, you will be infinitely more functional in your life if your joints and muscles can accomplish these basic human shapes that I just mentioned. These are basic human shapes that we were born with the capacity to do. I have watched my children from ages very little to 5 years old, and they can do this stuff, no problem. So what happened? We've forgotten, or we've got into training practices that have led us away from being able to do all that stuff. Ever heard the phrase, use it or lose it? The health of our bodies is dictated by this principle. If you want poor cardiovascular health, then don't ever stress your heart or lungs. If you want to get weaker, then never lift something heavy. And if you want your joints to hurt and deteriorate, then stop. Stop challenging them through a full range of motion. More simply put, if you want your function to decrease, then simply stop moving. What about muscle mass? Hey Marcus, you laid out a perfect formula for gaining muscle. Can I gain muscle with that formula and not sacrifice function? Well, it's unfortunate that many of the methods these days that I see being promoted to build muscle mass neglect many of the previously mentioned factors that determine function. What are the most common offenders to maintaining function, as I described, when people are chasing hypertrophy or muscle growth? Well, number one is not using full range of motion in their resistance training, period. Some people call this doing bro reps. Number two, limiting your movement selection to just a few exercises. At the end of the week, 5 movements can absolutely build muscle, like bench, squat, deadlift, press, pull-up. And if you do them over and over again, sure, you could get jacked. But you might lose out on some functionality if you don't express your body through other movements. The third and final piece is I see too much reliance on machines and or isolation exercises. And let me reiterate that these methods that I just mentioned, they work great for building muscle. You can isolate and use machines and pack on a ton of muscle. And if you want to get huge and build an impressive amount of muscle, then by all means, go ahead and make those functional mistakes. You'll still stimulate your body to grow muscle very well. But if you don't want to sacrifice your functional range in exchange for muscle, what can you do? What if you want both? Do you have to choose? Well, the short answer is no. But how? First, you have to learn, adopt, and apply these 3 key functional bodybuilding philosophies. Number 1 is emphasizing full range of motion always. You'll likely have to reduce your loads in training in order to accomplish this. It is required at first to allow your brain to expand into new, weaker areas. See, when we lift heavy, our brain starts to shorten our range of motion in order to protect us in ranges of motion that were weak. You're often most strong in the mid-range, and therefore the brain isn't going to allow you to squat ass to grass if you're lifting maximal loads. And periodically you're going to need to check yourself, because as you get stronger, you're going to get tempted to lift heavier, and as a result, you might find yourself shortening range of motion. FBB philosophy number 2, start to vary your movement selection more. As I mentioned, sticking to the same 3 to 4 exercises week after week can pack on muscle. But I'm going to encourage you to continue to vary your exercises to avoid imbalances and keep your mind-muscle connections growing. When it comes to joints and movement patterns, humans are great at compensating. We can get really efficient when we expose ourselves to only a few movements day in and day out. So don't allow this to happen. Do a wide variety of movements. Some of the most athletic and mobile Olympic weightlifters on the planet come from the Chinese weightlifting team. They have amazing strength and great range of motion in combination. It just so happens that they're also very well known for doing hundreds of different accessory exercises in their training too. So they don't fall victim to just doing the core 2 lifts of Olympic weightlifting, snatch and clean and jerk. No, they expand their movement selection greatly. The third and final philosophy point is to be sure to use free weights and perform unilateral training for at least 50% or more of your total training sets. Stop training with just machines. Stop training with just 2 feet and just 2 arms on the same barbell at a time. You might never know you have a mobility or functional limitation in your body until you start training one-sided. Okay, you've got your 3 philosophy points of maintaining functional muscle. Now it's time to put them into practice, and we need to continue to leverage highly effective and impactful training methods. See, if you keep the philosophy in mind, and then you apply it to tried and true hypertrophy supersetting methodology, then you absolutely have the perfect recipe for functional muscle. This is precisely how I build all of the Persist Pump workouts, which is a specific training track within functional bodybuilding for packing on functional muscle. I'm actually gonna break down two of the most effective FBB muscle building lifting formats that we use in pump. Think of these as your training templates. You can interchange movements and body parts, but you can stick to the same formats that I'm going to show you right now and build quality muscle that supports functional joints and movement all at the same time. The first format is something I call functional bodybuilding cutting edge body part splits. This is going to involve something known as compounding supersets. A compounding set is usually leveraging 2 to 4 exercises performed back to back to back that all work a similar body part or movement pattern. Each exercise has a slightly different intention to give the portion of the body being trained a varied stimulus. We can use the posterior chain to illustrate how this is done. It's a 3-movement compound set, and it goes like this. For movement number 1, you're going to begin with an exercise that you can lift heavy and stay safe. I'm calling this the overloading movement first. In my example, I'm doing a hip thrust. This is a short range of motion. It recruits a lot of muscles in the hips, and it drives up intensity. You'll take a short rest and move on to movement number 2. Movement number 2 is one where you're going to pick a movement that has a very range of motion focused emphasis. Something where you can extend the range of motion and also leverage unilateral training on top of that. For this example, I chose the split stance deficit Romanian deadlift. This is going to bias one side at a time, and the deficit will allow for lengthening of the hamstrings and the glutes under load. You'll take another short rest and move on to the final exercise, movement number 3. And for this movement, I want you to choose an exercise that you can cycle safely and quickly, and take the movement pattern or muscle groups to exhaustion or burnout. For my example I'm showing you, we've got a Russian kettlebell swing that I've added a band to speed up the cycle rate and the eccentric force. So in review, you've got 3 exercises. You're going to take short rests between exercises 1 through 3. Then once you've completed the 3rd movement, take a longer rest, maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and restart. Your repetitions could be 6, then 12, then 18, or 8, then 16, then 24. The reps get longer as you move to less demanding exercises down the line. Now remember, I mentioned this is just a training format. The movements are interchangeable. You could pull conceptually similar movements for another body part, like chest, for example. In place of the hip thrust, you could do a barbell pin press. In place of the RDL, you could do a single arm dumbbell bench press. And instead of Russian kettlebell swings, try clapping push-ups for the chest. Implement the same rest periods, same repetition schemes, and the same number of sets, somewhere in the 4 to 5 set range. Let's move on to method number 2. For method 2, I'm going to combine a full body superset with a fatigued base accessory superset. And let me illustrate the details now. Part 1 is going to use something called German body composition methods. This is a method that I was introduced to back in the early 2000s, and it was popularized by Charles Poliquin. We're going to combine upper and lower body movement patterns into a single superset. The key principles here are long time under tension in these movements. Movements that are going to demand a lot of muscle and brain to drive up intensity. We're also going to be focusing on shorter rest periods, and we are going to have to push loads that allow us to hit the top of our rep ranges as often as possible. The example that I'm showing of a lower body squatting with an upper body pulling is such a powerful combination. I literally dare anyone to go try this with very strict tempo and rest periods that are working to max intensity. You might just throw up like I did the first time I ever did it. So for this example, it's 3 to 4 working sets. Movement number 1 is going to be a unilateral lower body range of motion focused exercise. For that, I'm choosing the back rack split squat, specifically the knee over toe split squat variation that you're seeing here. You want to control that tempo down, pause at the bottom, come back up fast, and hit 10 reps on each leg. You only get a 45-second break, and then you're moving on to a bilateral range of motion focused upper body exercise. This is going to be the strict chest to bar, chest must touch the bar, pull up. And the tempo is strict again. 3 seconds on the descent, 1 second pause at the bottom, up fast, and pause at the top. You're aiming for 10 reps, and if you need to, you can use some assistance from a band or a machine. Okay, now you get another 45-second rest. It's back to the split squats, and you're alternating back and forth until you've reached 4 hard working sets. Now, I assure you that superset alone is going to be massively potent in intensity and will absolutely build muscle if you follow the recipe of energy in is greater than energy out. If your protein is right, this will provide the volume and the intensity needed to get to grow. But this workout's not over, because after a short rest period following the superset, we're going to finish off with another accessory superset. This time, we're not going to utilize as much tempo and time under tension. Instead, we're going to leverage higher speed movements, short rest periods, high reps, and thereby we're going to build a lot of additional volume in a short amount of time. Combined with part 1 of this workout, this 2-part combination is potent for muscle building, and it is perfectly consistent with our 3-part philosophy. I'm calling part 2 functional pump density work. It's an EMOM. EMOM stands for every minute on the minute. It's just a way of keeping you focused and not getting lazy and taking 2 to 4 minute rest periods. You start a clock, and as soon as it goes, at the beginning of minute number 1, you perform exercise number 1. When you're done with your reps, you rest. On minute number 2, you're going to perform the other exercise for reps. When that repetitions are done, then you move back to minute number 3, and you're back on the other exercise. And you're just alternating back and forth. It's a superset that follows the clock. So, for the first minute, you're going to perform a cyclist squat, holding a dumbbell in the goblet position for 15 reps. I like the cyclist squat because it's going to encourage deep range of motion in this movement. You can squat ass to grass. The second exercise, hey, we're using a machine. We're going with the single arm cable row. It's not bad to use machines, and in this case, I'm doing a unilateral exercise, so that's giving me some side-to-side balance, which is in line with our philosophy. You're going to perform 12 reps per arm, and notice that I'm pulling as low as I can on this pull down to get big range of motion on the cable row. So let me recap. Emphasize full range of motion. Remember, the end range of motion, the muscles are weaker, so you'll have to lower your weights on specific exercises. Don't worry, you're not going to get weaker. Start to vary your movement selection. Be sure to vary your movement selection to challenge new brain connections and keep your full body from compensating. Be sure to use free weights. Perform unilateral training for 50% or more of your training sets. You don't have to stop doing back squats and leg press. Just don't let that be all that you do. If you want more ideas on FBB exercises, then be sure to go and subscribe to the Functional Bodybuilding YouTube page. We have over 2,000 exercise demonstrations for you to look through. Just search dumbbell row on our page and you'll get over 20 variations on how to use that in your training. All right, that was a long one. Thank you as always for joining me. And if you want to be part of the functional muscle revolution, then drop down to the description below and click the button and go to Persist Pump for 2 weeks of a free trial and just see exactly how this can all be incorporated into a complete training program sent right to you. Also, be sure to grab the written description of these workouts that I just described in PDF form so you can take them to the gym tomorrow and you can go hit your first of many functional muscle workouts. See you next time.